I'm 31 years old, and if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd probably think I had it all together. A stable job, a decent apartment in the city, friends who still check in, parents who are proud. And of course, a girlfriend who looks like she stepped straight out of a magazine. People who meet her for the first time always say the same thing. You're lucky, man. She's stunning. And yes, she is stunning. The kind of beauty that doesn't just turn heads, it commands rooms. She walks in, and suddenly conversations pause. Eyes follow her, even women notice. That's what hooked me in the beginning. That presence. That confidence. But what no one else sees, what I've slowly come to realize, is that her beauty is just the wrapping paper. The real gift inside? Something sharp. Something poisonous. We met 2 years ago at a friend's birthday party. She was leaning against the bar, sipping a martini, scanning the room with a look that was half boredom, half hunger. When our eyes met, she smiled in a way that made me feel like I'd just been chosen. That's what she does. She makes you feel chosen. Our first months were intense. Late-night drives, weekends in hotels, endless conversations that felt like we were uncovering secrets no one else had the courage to speak. She made me feel alive, needed, desired. I mistook the fire for love. But somewhere along the way, the fire turned into something else. It stopped being about closeness and started being about control. It began with little comments. Why don't you ever dress nicer when we go out? Do you want people to think you're a nobody? Why do you hang out with your friends so much? Shouldn't your time be for me? You're too soft. If you want to be with me, you need to toughen up. I laughed it off at first. Told myself it was her personality. Bold, outspoken, unfiltered. But slowly, her words sank into me like hooks. I started questioning the way I dressed, the way I spoke, even the way I worked. She didn't just want a boyfriend. She wanted a project. A puppet. The fights became routine. If I disagreed, she'd twist it until I was the one apologizing. If I caught her in a lie, she'd laugh and say, "You're so dramatic. Relax." And if I ever pulled away, she'd suddenly flip the switch, shower me with attention, with kisses, with whispered promises in the dark, just enough to make me believe again. It was a cycle. Push, pull, hurt, heal, poison, antidote. And I kept drinking it. But recently, something has changed. Her lies aren't even subtle anymore. She doesn't hide the names on her phone, doesn't bother erasing the perfume from her clothes. And the worst part? The way she smiles when I notice. Like she wants me to see. Like she enjoys watching me unravel. And sometimes, when I lie awake at night and watch her sleep peacefully beside me, I catch myself wondering, is she daring me to confront her? Or is this all just the beginning of a game I don't even know the rules of yet? The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday evening. She'd told me that morning she was going to meet her old college friend for dinner. A girl named Anna, someone I'd never met, though she'd mentioned her a few times in passing. I didn't think much of it until later that night when I picked up her jacket to hang it in the closet. The scent hit me instantly. Strong cologne. Masculine. Not mine. Not anything that could be confused with a women's perfume. When she got home, she was humming to herself, tapping out a rhythm on her phone. She kissed me lightly on the cheek and headed straight to the shower. I followed her into the bathroom doorway and asked, "So, how's Anna doing?" There was the slightest pause, half a second, before she answered, "She's fine, just stressed with work." Then she laughed, turning the water on. "Why? You jealous of my girls' nights?" Her voice was light, teasing, but her eyes in the mirror were sharp. She wasn't just answering. She was testing me. From that night on, I started paying closer attention. Saturday, she claimed she was at yoga. But when she came home, her shoes were spotless, her mat still rolled up in the trunk. When I asked how class went, she smiled faintly and said, "Exhausting," before collapsing on the couch. I wanted to press her, but I didn't. I just watched her scroll her phone with that same sly smile that never quite reached her eyes. Another time, she said she was meeting her cousin for lunch. Later, when she told me about it, she slipped, called her he, before quickly correcting it to she. When I raised an eyebrow, she giggled. "You're imagining things. God, you're so paranoid sometimes." She said it so casually, so dismissively, that I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Was I paranoid? Was I twisting things in my head? But then I found the receipt. It was shoved in the side pocket of her purse. Lunch for two. Wine. A restaurant in the city we had never been to together. Not the kind of place you go with family. When I showed it to her that evening, her reaction chilled me. She didn't even look surprised. Didn't flinch. She glanced at the paper, then at me and said, "Oh, that? Yeah, I met with a colleague. Work stuff. You seriously need to stop snooping in my things. It's pathetic." Her words landed like a slap. Not just the lie, but the venom in her voice. The way she smiled right after, as if enjoying my silence. I wanted to shout, to demand the truth. Instead, I just stared at her. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and tilted her head. "You know," she said softly, "you make it so easy for me. I don't even have to try anymore." That night I barely slept. My mind replayed everything. The pauses, the slips, the perfume, the receipt. She wasn't hiding. Not really. She was leaving just enough behind for me to find. And when I did, she turned it against me. It wasn't just lying. It was theater. Every time I confronted her, she painted me as the jealous boyfriend, the insecure one, the control freak. And the more I pushed, the more believable her role became. I was the one who looked unstable, obsessed. She was rewriting the story of us in real time. The most terrifying moment came a week later. We were having dinner, quiet, almost peaceful, when she suddenly leaned across the table and said, "You know, sometimes I think you'd fall apart without me. You'd lose yourself completely. And I wonder, how far could I push you before you finally break?" She smiled as she stabbed a piece of steak with her fork, her eyes locked on mine. My blood turned cold. Was it a joke? A taunt? A confession? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just sat there, watching her chew slowly, savoring the silence. And in that silence, I realized something I had been too blind to see before. She wasn't covering her tracks because she didn't need to. She wanted me to see just enough to keep me spiraling. Every lie was a breadcrumb, every slip a test. This wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. And the real question that kept me awake long after she'd fallen asleep beside me was no longer, is she cheating? It was far darker, what game is she really playing with me? I had promised myself I wouldn't sink to this level. That no matter how much I doubted her, I wouldn't turn into the kind of man who searched through his girlfriend's things like some desperate detective. But promises mean nothing when your sanity feels like it's slipping through your fingers. One night, after she fell asleep, I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her breathing. Calm. Even. As if she didn't have a care in the world. And maybe she didn't. Because the chaos wasn't in her. It was in me. She had placed it there, carefully, deliberately, drip by drip. I slid out of bed quietly, heart pounding. Her purse was on the chair in the corner. My hands shook as I reached for it. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, just enough to calm my thoughts. But nothing about what I found calmed me. At first, it was the usual. Receipts from expensive restaurants, none of which we had ever visited together. Lipstick-stained napkins. A small box from a jewelry store. Empty. My stomach twisted. Then, at the very bottom I found something else. A notebook. Black leather cover. Slim. Almost elegant. I froze, my fingers trembling as I opened it. It wasn't a diary. Not really. It was notes. Observations. About me. He asked about Anna again. I could see the doubt in his eyes. Perfect. Tried the perfume trick today. He noticed. Reaction lasted 15 minutes. Getting easier to break him. Next step. Bring up a new male name at dinner. Watch closely. Page after page. Dates, details. My every reaction documented like I was part of an experiment. My vision blurred. I wanted to rip the notebook to shreds, to wake her up and scream in her face. But instead I sat frozen, staring at her careful handwriting. She wasn't just cheating. She was studying me. Testing me. I put the notebook back exactly as I found it. My hands felt numb, my chest hollow. I crawled back into bed beside her. She stirred slightly, rolling over to press her body against mine. I lay there stiff as a corpse, her warmth suddenly unbearable. And then, in the dark, she whispered, half asleep. "You'll never leave me. You need me too much." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Had she sensed me? Or was it just another test, planted in my ear like poison? The next morning, she was all sweetness. Making coffee, humming, telling me about her plans for the day. I watched her move around the kitchen, radiant and untouchable, while the images from that notebook burned in my head. I finally managed to ask, as casually as I could, "So, who's Daniel?" She stopped stirring her coffee for the briefest moment. Then she smiled. "Oh, just a colleague." "Why?" "Jealous." Her tone was playful, her eyes daring me to push further. I didn't. I just nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, I was screaming. Because I knew the truth. Daniel wasn't just a name. Daniel was a move. A test. Something she had written about days earlier, before she even said it aloud. That evening, when she left for yoga, I sat alone in the apartment, staring at the wall. My hands clenched into fists. I had evidence now, not of an affair, but of something much worse. Proof that she was deliberately dismantling me, brick by brick, and enjoying every second of it. I realized with a cold certainty, this wasn't a relationship. It was a game. And I wasn't her partner. I was her subject. And the question that gnawed at me wasn't just why. It was how far was she planning to go? Ever since I found that notebook, sleep has become impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I see her handwriting, those neat little notes about me like I'm nothing more than a lab rat. Reaction lasted 15 minutes. Getting easier to break him. Those phrases play on a loop in my mind, echoing louder than her voice ever could. I told myself I needed proof. Not just receipts or perfume or slips of the tongue. Proof I could see with my own eyes. Proof I couldn't explain away no matter how good her lies were. So when she announced one Thursday evening that she was going to dinner with a friend from college, I didn't argue. I smiled, kissed her cheek, and told her to have fun. Then, 10 minutes later, I grabbed my jacket and followed. She always underestimated me. Maybe she thought I was too broken to fight back, too wrapped up in paranoia to act with clarity. But I had clarity now. Cold, sharp clarity. I parked a few streets over and watched her from a distance as she entered a sleek restaurant downtown. She walked in alone, but within minutes, a man joined her. Tall, well-groomed, confident. She greeted him with that smile, the one she used to save for me, the one that made me feel like the only man in the world. Seeing it directed at him was like being stabbed. They didn't kiss. They didn't hold hands. But their body language said everything. She leaned in close, laughed at every word, touched his wrist lightly as she spoke. It wasn't casual. It was calculated. I raised my phone, hands trembling, and snapped photos through the windshield. Each click felt like another nail in the coffin of the illusion I'd been living in. After an hour, they left together. Not arm in arm, not flaunting, but with a familiarity that screamed of routine. He held the door for her, and she looked up at him with that same sharp smile I'd seen when she toyed with me at dinner. It wasn't affection. It was victory. They walked down the block, turned a corner, and disappeared into the glow of a hotel entrance. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to run inside, to drag her out, to destroy the lie then and there. But I didn't. Because I remembered her notebook. This was a move. A test. She wanted me to break. She needed me to lose control. And if I did, I would be playing the part she had scripted for me all along. The unstable, jealous boyfriend. So I stayed in the car, shaking, watching the glass doors close behind her. When she came home hours later, she smelled faintly of champagne. She tossed her purse on the couch, stretched, and said, Anna sends her love. Her tone was casual, almost bored. Then she looked at me with a tiny smirk tugging at the corner of her lips, as if she knew. As if she could see the storm raging inside me. I forced a smile. Glad you had a good night. She raised an eyebrow, studying me. Then she leaned closer, whispered in my ear. You've been quiet lately. That's good. I like you better this way. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the scene outside the hotel. The way she disappeared through those doors. The way she smiled at him. The way she smirked at me when she came home. She wasn't just betraying me. She was taunting me. And then another thought struck me like lightning. Maybe this wasn't just about infidelity or control. Maybe the whole point was to break me so completely that when she finally left, when she finally pulled the trigger on whatever plan she had, no one would believe me. She wasn't covering her tracks because she didn't need to. The evidence was all there, but wrapped in a story where I was the paranoid lunatic. As I lay in bed beside her, I realized something terrifying. I had seen her with my own eyes. I had photos on my phone, proof of her lies. But even with that, I felt powerless. Because proof meant nothing if she had already built a narrative where my proof was just another symptom of my paranoia. I was living in a trap, and she had designed it so well that even the truth looked like madness. And the question that gnawed at me, more than anything else, was this. If she's this far ahead of me now, what's the endgame she's leading me toward? After the night I watched her walk into that hotel with him, something inside me finally broke, but not in the way she wanted. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I swallowed it whole, let the acid of it burn through me, and stayed silent. For the first time, I realized silence was my only weapon. Because silence meant she couldn't read me. And if she couldn't read me, she couldn't script my next move. The next morning, she floated around the apartment as if nothing had happened. She hummed as she poured coffee, kissed me on the cheek, asked about my plans for the day. She looked so natural, so effortless, that for a second I almost questioned myself. Had I imagined it? Had my exhaustion twisted reality into something darker? But then I remembered the photos on my phone, the cold proof staring back at me. No, I hadn't imagined anything. When I glanced up at her across the kitchen, she was already watching me. Not smiling, not frowning, just watching. Like a scientist waiting to see how the subject reacts to the needle. I forced a smile and said, "Thanks for the coffee." Her lips curled just slightly. Approval. She liked that I was playing calm. She thought she was winning. But that day, as soon as she left, I began preparing. First, I bought a second phone. Cheap. Untraceable. She had already invaded every corner of my digital life. I was sure of it. This phone would be mine alone, my vault for everything I was about to collect. Second, I started documenting. Every receipt, every late night, every perfume stain. I photographed them, backed them up in multiple places. I wrote down times, dates, words. I turned myself into a recorder, an archivist of her lies. And third, I started watching her differently. Not as my girlfriend, not even as my betrayer, but as my opponent. Every smile was a move. Every sigh, every slip of the tongue, part of her strategy. And once I began seeing her this way, the whole picture changed. A week later, I tested my theory. At dinner, I casually said, "I ran into your friend Anna today. Funny coincidence." She froze for half a second. Half a second I'll never forget. Then she laughed. "Really? Where?" I shrugged. "At the cafe near my office." Her eyes narrowed. For a moment, she seemed to be calculating. Then she smiled, wide and warm. "You must be mistaken. Anna doesn't even live in the city anymore." I nodded. "Huh. Guess I was wrong." Her smile sharpened. "You usually are." She thought she'd won that exchange, but she didn't realize, that pause, that flicker in her eyes, was exactly what I needed. She had lied about Anna. She was lying about everything. But the deeper I dug, the more terrifying it became. One night, while she showered, I checked her desk drawers. Inside I found a folder. Not just receipts or scraps of paper, but documents. My bank statements. Copies of my emails. Even medical records. And at the very bottom, a draft, half prepared, but clear enough, a petition for separation. In it, she described me as unstable, paranoid, controlling. There were even examples listed, some of them true, twisted into something ugly, some of them complete lies. I sank into her chair, the folder shaking in my hands. She wasn't just betraying me. She was building a case. Piece by piece, she was preparing to erase me, to walk away with everything. My money, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. And I finally understood. The affair wasn't the endgame. It was the distraction. The real game was bigger. That night, I couldn't look at her the same way. When she came out of the shower, hair wet, smiling, asking what I was thinking about, I forced myself to say, "Nothing. Just work." She kissed my forehead and whispered, "You worry too much." I smiled. And inside, I swore. Never again. I had let her run the game long enough. Now it was my turn. The folder I found in her desk haunted me. Every page, every fabricated story, every twisted half-truth was a nail she was preparing for my coffin. I realized then, I wasn't just fighting for my dignity or for the truth. I was fighting for survival. If she finished her story before I finished mine, I'd be erased. So I started moving in silence. My first step was to lock her out of my business accounts. I told my brothers I was changing passwords because of cybersecurity threats. They didn't question me. But in truth, I was cutting off her access. Every document she had stolen proved she already knew too much. I couldn't afford to let her get one more piece. The second step was insurance. I gave a trusted friend, someone far from our circle, a copy of the evidence I'd been collecting. The photos, the receipts, the recordings of her laughing about me in the car. I told him, if anything happens to me, you take this to my lawyer. His eyes widened, but he didn't ask questions. Maybe he saw the look in mine. Meanwhile, at home, I kept my mask perfect. When she came home late, I smiled. When she mentioned new names, "Oh, Mark said the funniest thing today," I laughed and asked, "Really? What did he say?" When she pressed her hand against my cheek and whispered, "You'd be lost without me," I kissed her back. Every fake smile I gave her was a shield. Every nod, every chuckle was a lie to protect myself. But beneath the mask, I was sharpening my blade. And then came the night that told me she was almost ready. I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of her voice. She was downstairs, talking softly on the phone. I crept down the hallway and listened from the shadows. "Yes," she was saying. "He's calmer now. That's good. He's letting his guard down. By next week, we'll have enough. I'll file, and it'll be clean." My blood turned to ice. She wasn't just imagining my downfall. She was planning it on a timeline. I recorded the call. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone, but I caught every word. Proof. Finally, something undeniable. When she hung up, I rushed back upstairs and slipped into bed before she returned. She slid under the covers, pressed her body against mine, and whispered, "Sleep well." I didn't. I couldn't. My eyes stayed open until the sun bled through the curtains. The next day, she moved differently. She wore her red dress, the one she always saved for moments when she wanted to remind me she was in control. Her smile was brighter, her laugh sharper, her movements deliberate. She was glowing like a woman who believed victory was already hers. Over dinner, she leaned across the table and said, "Do you ever think about what would happen if we weren't together? Honestly, I don't think you'd survive without me." I forced a laugh. "Maybe you're right." Her eyes glittered. She thought she had me exactly where she wanted. But here's what she didn't know. While she smiled, I was already finalizing a meeting with my lawyer. While she taunted me, my folder of evidence was growing thicker by the day. And while she thought I was too broken to fight, I had already planted seeds, backups, witnesses, insurance, for the day the war broke open. She believed I was the prey. But in truth, I was already laying the trap beneath her feet. And as I sat across from her that night, Watching her sip wine, laughing like a queen, a strange calm settled over me. She was almost ready to strike. But so was I. I had spent weeks playing the role she had written for me. The quiet, paranoid, broken man who doubted his own memory. I smiled when she lied. I nodded when she taunted. I let her believe she was weaving the perfect story. But now it was my turn to write. It started with dinner. She came home late, wearing that same red dress, her perfume heavy in the air, the faintest smear of lipstick not quite wiped away. She kissed me on the cheek, poured herself wine, and said, "Traffic was terrible." I smiled. Of course it was. We sat across from each other, candles flickering between us. She talked about her meeting, her colleagues, sprinkling new names into the story the way she always did. I listened, nodding, letting her words pile up like kindling. Then I leaned back, sipped my drink, and said casually, "Funny thing, I drove by the hotel on 7th tonight. Saw you walking in. Guess the traffic wasn't that bad." Her hand froze on the stem of her glass. Just for a second. Then she laughed. "You must have imagined it. Or maybe you saw someone else." I slid my phone across the table. On the screen, the photos. Her with him outside the restaurant. Her with him walking into the hotel. Crystal clear. Her smile didn't vanish. But it changed. Sharper. Colder. "Well," she said slowly, swirling the wine in her glass, "I suppose you've finally learned how to pay attention." I expected denial. Anger. Even tears. But what I got was worse. She leaned forward, her voice low, almost tender. "Do you think this changes anything? Do you think your little pictures will save you? I've been building this for months. Every outburst, every suspicion, every moment you looked unstable, it's all written down. And when the time comes, everyone will see you for what you are." She tapped her finger against the table. Paranoid. Dangerous. Broken. I held her gaze. For the first time, I didn't flinch. "Maybe," I said softly. "But the thing about stories is, people like proof." I opened another folder on my phone. Recordings. Her voice in the car, mocking me. Her whisper on the phone, "He's calmer now. Next week we'll have enough. I'll file, and it'll be clean." Her eyes widened. Just for a moment. The mask slipped. And that moment was worth every sleepless night. She laughed again, louder this time, almost manic. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can beat me at my own game." I leaned in, my voice steady. "I don't need to beat you. I just need to show the world who you really are." Silence stretched between us. The candle flame flickered, casting her face in sharp shadows. For the first time, I saw something new in her expression. Not fear. Not guilt. But recognition. She finally realized I wasn't the puppet she thought I was. Later that night, as we lay in bed, she turned to me, her eyes glittering in the dark. "This isn't over," she whispered. I smiled into the darkness. "I know." After that night at the dinner table, the rules changed. We no longer pretended. The mask was off for both of us. She knew I had proof. I knew she had a story. Now every smile, every word, every movement was a calculated move on the board. The next morning, she didn't kiss me before leaving. She didn't hum as she poured her coffee. She sat across from me, sipping in silence, her eyes fixed on mine like a predator watching for weakness. Finally, she said, "You should be careful with those recordings. Taken out of context, they can look desperate." I forced a calm smile. Desperate is hiding hotel receipts in your purse. Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite anger. Just acknowledgement. The days that followed felt like living in a war zone where no bullets had been fired yet, but both sides were armed to the teeth. When she came home late, she no longer bothered with excuses. She dropped her purse on the table and asked, "Did you get any good photos tonight?" I'd shrug and reply, "Not as good as the ones of you laughing about breaking me." She'd laugh at that. Sharp, metallic. We'll see which story people believe. One night, she walked into the living room, holding my own notebook. The one where I had been documenting her lies. She flipped through the pages slowly, savoring each line. You really think this makes you look sane? Writing down the times I said I was at yoga? Do you know what a judge would call this? Obsession. I swallowed the rage burning in my throat and said nothing. Because she was right. In the wrong way. In her hands, even my evidence could become ammunition against me. But then I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Funny thing about obsession, I said. Sometimes it just means someone finally stopped being blind. For the briefest second, her smirk faltered. The tension reached a breaking point on Saturday. We were at a small gathering with friends, people who had always admired her, who saw her as charming, magnetic, perfect. She played her role flawlessly, laughing at jokes, telling stories, her hand brushing my arm just enough to make it look like affection. But when no one else was looking, she leaned close and whispered, "Smile wider. If you don't, they'll start to wonder." I did smile. Wider than ever. And as I did, I whispered back, "They'll wonder more when they see the photos." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't answer. That night, the storm broke. We stood in the kitchen, the clock ticking loudly in the silence between us. Finally, she slammed her glass on the counter. "Do you really think you can win? I've spent months building this. Everyone sees you as fragile already. One more push and you'll look insane." I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressed play. Her voice filled the kitchen. "He's calmer now. Next week we'll have enough. I'll file, and it'll be clean." She froze. Her eyes darkened. Then she smiled. Slow. Cold. "So that's your play. Evidence against evidence. Lies against lies. Do you even realize what we've become?" I stared back at her, my chest heavy, my pulse steady. "We've become exactly what you wanted. But here's the thing, you're not the only one who knows how to play." We stood there for a long time, neither of us moving, like two fighters circling in the ring, waiting for the first strike. She whispered finally, "This won't end the way you think." And I whispered back, "It won't end the way you think either." That night, lying beside her, I understood the truth. There was no marriage anymore, no love, no betrayal. There was only the game. Two players, one board, and no way out except total destruction. And as much as it terrified me, part of me felt more alive than I had in years. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving her. I was fighting her. The tension in our home had become unbearable. Every smile was a weapon, every silence a trap. For weeks, we circled each other like predators, waiting for the first chance to strike. I thought I was ready. I thought my folder of evidence and my careful silence gave me the advantage. But she struck first. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I came home from work to find two police officers waiting at the door. My stomach dropped before a word was spoken. They asked me questions. Careful, polite, but cutting. "Do you and your girlfriend argue often? Have there been raised voices, broken things, threats?" I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it. Her move. She had gone to them first, spun her story, painted me as the unstable, paranoid boyfriend. The officers weren't accusing me, not yet, but I could see it in their eyes. Doubt. Suspicion. The seed had been planted. When they left, she was in the kitchen, sipping wine, calm as ice. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Rough day." I stared at her, fists clenched, fighting the urge to shatter the glass in her hand. "What did you tell them?" She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I just said I've been worried about you. That you've been tense. Isn't that true?" Her smile widened. She was enjoying this. But she didn't know everything. That night, after she went to bed, I pulled out my second phone, the one she didn't know existed. On it, I had the recording from the night she whispered into her phone. "He's calmer now. Next week we'll have enough. I'll file, and it'll be clean." I sent it to my lawyer, along with the photos, the receipts, the copy of her draft separation papers. His reply came within the hour. "This changes everything. We'll move first." For the first time in months, I felt the weight shift. The next evening, when she came home late again, I was waiting. She set her purse down, already smirking, ready to test me. But before she could speak, I slid an envelope across the table. Inside, copies of the recordings, the photos, the receipts. Her face remained perfectly still. No shock, no panic. Just that cold, calculating stare. Then, slowly, she smiled. "So," she said softly, "you finally grew a spine." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "No. I finally grew teeth." For the first time, the silence belonged to me. She didn't speak. She didn't laugh. She just studied me, as if recalculating every move she thought she had mastered. And in that silence, I realized, the game had truly changed. We were no longer circling. We were attacking.
The night after I slid the envelope across the table, the air in our apartment shifted. It was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, silent but lethal. We didn't speak much, but every glance, every gesture, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. She didn't crumble when she saw the evidence. She didn't cry or scream or deny. She smiled. That smile, the one I used to think was beautiful, now felt like the cold curve of a knife against my throat. The following morning, she dressed in silence. Her movements were precise, deliberate, as if she were preparing armor. At the door, she paused, looked over her shoulder, and said, "Careful with your little folder. You may think you've cornered me, but I've already written the ending." And then she left. For hours, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that envelope I had given her. Was I too early? Too bold? Did I just show my hand before the final move? My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. She's contacted her attorney. Things are moving faster now. Be ready. Faster. That word rattled me. She wasn't retreating. She was counterattacking. That evening, she came home with a different energy. No smirk, no pretense. She poured herself wine, sat across from me, and laid down her own stack of papers. "Your lawyer isn't the only one who can play this game," she said. I glanced at the documents. Statements, affidavits, pages of notes, the same ones I'd found in her notebook, twisted into official reports. Stories of my supposed paranoia, my violent temper, my obsession. It was all there, in black and white, neatly packaged for a judge. "You see," she whispered, leaning closer, "all those nights you thought I was just teasing you? I was documenting you. Every slip, every doubt, every time you raise your voice. It's all here. And people will believe me, because they always do." For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake. I picked up her stack, set it aside, and pulled out mine, thicker, heavier. Photos of her with him. Receipts. Recordings. The phone call about her timeline. I slid it across the table. Her eyes flicked down, scanning the pages. No smile this time. No laugh. Just silence. "Finally," she said, "so you really think you've won?" "No," I said quietly. "I think I've survived." The silence between us stretched, sharp and brittle. She tapped her nails against the table, her eyes narrowing. Then she leaned back and let out a low laugh. "You've learned more than I expected," she admitted. "But you don't understand, do you? Winning isn't about proof. It's about control, and I still control the story." I leaned forward, my voice calm, steady. "Not anymore, because now the story is written in your voice. You planned every step, every test, every lie, and I recorded all of it. They won't just see me, they'll see you. And once that mask slips, no one will ever believe you again." For the first time, I saw it. A crack. Small but real. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes flickering with something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. She covered it quickly, taking another sip of wine. But I had seen it, and that was enough. That night, lying in bed, she whispered, "This isn't over." And for once, I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel broken. I felt calm. "I know," I whispered back. "But next time, you won't be the one writing the ending." In the darkness, I finally understood there were no winners here. Not really. The love we had once shared was gone, burned to ash. What was left was two players, two predators, circling until one of us fell. But at least now, for the first time, I wasn't prey. I was playing too.